we're going to get straight into it. My name's Kate Day. I'm not Annabelle Dixon, as is billed on your programme. Annabelle had to go and cover the summit for us at Politico at the last minute, so she's in Brussels. And instead you get me. I run Politico's operation in London. You may know us as a politics publication founded in Washington. We then launched in Brussels in 2015, and we very recently launched London Playbook, our flagship morning newsletter here in London. So we're just getting going in London, and it's fantastic to be here. I'm now going to hand over to each of our guests and have them introduce themselves. So why don't you start?
Oh, okay. Hi, I'm Ramūnas Vilpišauskas from Vilnius University, and I'll briefly present 3 points about Lithuania's approach towards Brexit. Well, the first point will be how the general position of Lithuanian authorities evolved since around 2013 till now. The second point is about the key concerns related to Brexit, and the third about key actors. So speaking about the general approach, until June 2016, the whole issue was seen as an issue of UK's domestic politics. It was clearly seen, well, first of all, as an issue of Conservative Party, and if it had wider repercussions, then it related only to the UK's domestic affairs. And there was basic disbelief that this could lead to Brexit. The hope was that, well, after renegotiation, Britain will be helped by EU partners to get what would help to win referendum. So the outcome of the referendum came as a big surprise. The day before the referendum, our ambassador to the EU was publicly saying there is no plan B. I'm quite sure there was a plan B, but public position was that we are certain that referendum will end in the UK remaining in the EU. So after such an unexpected outcome, first there was a big disappointment expressed. At the same time, there was a wish to be as cooperative as possible with the UK in resolving issues related to Brexit, but by sticking quite clearly to the rule of unanimity among the EU partners. EU is negotiating as a single actor. There is a strong agreement about the basic principles that were already mentioned today a number of times, that the single market is indivisible, no cherry picking, stage-like approach towards Brexit negotiations. All these principles were publicly supported by Lithuanian authorities. So unity is seen as very important among EU27, but cooperative approach towards the UK is also another important thing which is underlined. The second point, the key concerns of Lithuanian authorities. In general, the process is seen as a lose-lose situation where all parties involved will experience losses. So it's basically about the damage control, how to minimize losses. Our president and Minister of Foreign Affairs in public said that we wish to maintain the relationship with the UK that would be as close to the current situation as possible, which means introducing as little new barriers to common relationship as possible. And the key concerns, and here I think Lithuania and other Baltic states are quite specific among EU27. First of all, our security. UK's role in the Baltic region as a security contributor. Our officials usually mention that UK has its military presence in Estonia as a NATO partner, in general, NATO membership, that UK will remain an important ally as a NATO member. So security is what makes, I think, Baltic states somewhat different from most of other EU member states, maybe not all, but most of others. And then come issues which are typical to Central Eastern European countries. First of all, citizens' rights. Lithuanian community in the UK is the biggest community living abroad. So it's bigger than in Ireland or the US, where traditionally Lithuanians have been present in quite numerous numbers. And money, what are the budgetary effects of UK leaving the EU in terms of agricultural support? Also another specific Lithuanian issue, decommissioning nuclear power plant, which was part of accession process into the EU. There are still quite significant financial needs in order to decommission this power plant to continue as agreed according to the accession treaty. So security, citizens' rights, money. These three are the key issues. Trade, yes, important, but not as much as citizens' rights. Yeah. So to conclude with the third point is, initially the issue was interesting mostly to a very small circle of foreign policy makers like President, Minister of Foreign Affairs, who are directly involved in foreign policy, and a few experts like myself, 5 or so, who are interested in the EU affairs in the country. Gradually, especially after the referendum, more and more people, more societal actors are getting involved. First of all, again, Lithuanian community in the UK. Increasingly, our businesses that are exporting into the UK. We had this spring a big business event debating possible effects. Again, damage control, quite negative sentiment among businesses regarding Brexit. And I think as negotiations proceed, probably more actors will be voicing their opinion. But so far, it has not become an important domestic politics issue. Most actors are quite unanimous in what Lithuania's position should be, what is the desired outcome of Brexit, which is, as I said, as little change to the current relations between the UK and the EU as possible. Thank you.
Wonderful, thank you.
All right.
Over to you.
Mads Jensen from University of Copenhagen. I'm representing the view of Denmark. So being the last, you run the risk of echoing some of the great points already been made. So I'll do that, and I apologize for that, but I might add some nuances to it. So the main priority of Denmark with regard to Brexit is the same as the priority for Germany. It's about protecting the unity of the single market, full stop. And there's a feeling in Denmark that the UK played a pivotal role in creating the single market, the internal market, but it could also play a pivotal role in disintegrating the single market. Even though Denmark is a great ally of the UK, there's this feeling that if the UK is getting a special deal, other countries might want the same, and this could lead to this disintegrative process of the single market, and it would be very costly for Denmark. Of course, we got special interests, special economic interests when it comes to selling agricultural products, but we already developed coping strategies for dealing with that, one of them being cultivating new markets, basically. So we already had a delegation going to Japan and to Asia, the rest of Asia, where we're trying to sell our bacon and butter and other agricultural products. So we have coping strategies in place there. So it's simply about not kind of looking at the narrow gains on landing a good deal with the UK, which could jeopardize the entire functioning of the single market. So the UK is accounting for 6 to 7% of the total Danish trade. The rest of the EU countries would be around 60%. So it's 10 times more. So it would be bad to kind of jeopardize the single market based on getting a good deal with the UK. In terms of establishing the Danish positions on Brexit, we very early on developed a EU coordination mechanism. It basically followed the principles of the existing EU coordination mechanism, where you have a very centralized system with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs present in all parts of the process and making sure that we have a position on all issues. But it's combining decentralization, where it's up to the most affected ministries to determine the national interest and to involve interest groups. And the system has been greatly frustrated, or the people working in the system has been greatly frustrated by the UK not knowing their own position. So it's a reactive system that we have in Denmark, and we need something to establish a position on. But when the other side is not having a clear position, it's difficult. So we hope that the UK will stop kicking the can and try to win time and come up with something that we can establish a position on. That's it.
Wonderful, thank you. And last but not least, Mads as well.
Hello. So my name is also Mads, but Mads Braun from Södertörn University, Stockholm. Well, being the last speaker, a bit hesitant how I should start this, has been mentioned by previous speakers. We had it in the previous panel on the Visegrad groups, the notion of the UK as the best friend. I think that is a kind of a good term to use to describe the Swedish take on this, but rather as being on a party, and just before the cake is being served, you see your former best friend walking out of a room. You are concerned, why is my former best friend leaving? You're concerned about the consequences of this, and you're very much surprised. And in the end, you still keep eating the cake and being a bit concerned, but still enjoying the benefits of the EU membership. And let me take and explain these terms a bit more, why I would describe the UK as the best friend of Sweden. Well, if you go and look at statistics of voting in the Council, you will see that Sweden is the country that votes most similar to the UK. There have been studies done in the past on whom you would consult first on different issues in the Council work, lower down in the Council hierarchy, and Swedish diplomats have a preference to consult it with, or at least they have had a preference to consult issues firstly with their British colleagues, prior to the Danish colleagues. So there's a kind of relevance to speak of it as a best friend. But then why this eating the cake thing? Well, if you look at both public opinions in Sweden on EU membership and the general take of a political elite, if Sweden had a kind of skeptical approach to European integration in the 90s, it has changed into a much more positive take of it. And a lot is based on what also used to be a British perspective of viewing the EU as primarily focused on the single market. That is, Sweden has a bit of a specific membership, not being a part of the euro. Not very many Swedes would like to have a euro. Not very many Swedes would like, in this political elite either, would like to take the step towards the euro. But Swedes are quite happy with the situation they have had, or they have, and it has brought a lot of benefits to the countries in economic terms. So this is the non-understanding then of the British narrative, because the kind of idea is we used to have very similar preferences, and now all of a sudden the British side is doing a completely different reading of it than the Swedish side. And then we can mention that it was Sweden, UK and Ireland, the three countries that actually opened up the labour market directly in 2004 for unlimited access to citizens of a new EU member state at that time. But Sweden is still concerned. And you can see it in the sense that the Swedish government has commissioned 3 investigations into the consequences of the Brexit for Sweden. One is focusing on the more political consequences, but is, okay, the Swedish membership based on not being a part of the Eurozone might be affected of the UK leaving as kind of a strong country speaking on behalf of those countries not having the euro and other issues related to the single market. Also, a report produced by Business Sweden on the consequences for Swedish enterprises companies. And another report was commissioned by the Trade Council on the consequences of Swedish trade. But the main point of a Swedish position would be the same as Mats clearly stressed in the Danish case. That is, the single market, the maintenance of a single market is overall priority. And that is not something that would be compromised about. And this is something then which goes back to something that the Swedish perspective would view as something that used to be a common priority between Sweden and UK, but is not anymore. I think I end there. Thank you.